here's why I think her videos all have now millions and millions and millions of views. Even though it's not even a week ago that she started telling the story, is because she is a good leader. We talk about leadership a lot on this podcast, ownership, accountability. We talk about how it doesn't matter if you consider yourself a leader or not. By the fact that you live in an isolated society and you almost definitely do not have the village that you were designed to need, congratulations, you are now a leader. You don't have that cultural cohesion, that vision, that village making decisions for you like basically all of your ancestors did. You have to be leader of your own life. So we talk about that a lot. The classic example I always go to, since I have a lot of mom listeners, is like with chores. That I've said this before and I'll say it again, that it's so common for moms to have an attitude, like to walk around the house and say, nobody ever helps me. Nobody ever helps me with this. Like this house is a mess and nobody ever helps me. But see, you are not taking accountability for the fact that the house isn't getting clean. So you are not being accountable while yelling at other people for not being accountable for their own chores. Like, watch how things change when you say, you know what, I'm the leader. This is on me. This is on me. I have not created a proper incentive system. I have not had the one-on-one sit-down conversations that I need to have to properly motivate people to keep this house clean. I haven't carved out the time to have some difficult conversations. If I have to sit down with each person in this house individually and have a 2-hour conversation about what chore system will work for them and why it matters and the improvement it can make and the difference it would make in the overall well-being of the house. If I have to do that, then I will find time to do that because the buck stops with me. Watch how that changes things. So that's that accountability. That's that leadership saying, I am not going to point fingers and pass the buck. I will turn that finger right around and point it at me. It's my fault that no one is doing anything to help around here. I take responsibility for it, and we are going to move forward accordingly with me in that leadership role. So that's what Reesa is doing here. Notice that the part that I told you to key in on with what she said, as she tells this story, she doesn't fully present herself as a victim in a certain sense. Obviously, she is a victim. 100% she is a victim. But I feel like the English language is a little bit deficient here. I feel like we need different words for victim, because there is victim meaning a technical identification. You were victimized. This man conned her. She is absolutely a victim. But then we need a second word for, okay, technically, yes, she is a victim, but she does not have a victim mentality, meaning she is clearly trying to bring good out of this situation. She is, for her own benefit, she is acknowledging things that maybe in hindsight she could have done differently. She is learning lessons so that she won't repeat these, things that led to these bad situations in the future. So there's no self-condemnation here, as there shouldn't be, but she is learning lessons from it and willing to take a clear-eyed look at things that she simply couldn't or didn't see at the time that she would like to bring into the future. So in that sense, it's like that's where I think we need an English word of someone who is technically, they have been victimized, but they are not in the mentality of a victim. They have a strong mindset moving forward. And I think that's what makes her so delightful to listen to, is when you watch all 56 or whatever, it's 50 something of Reesa's videos, you see a leader. This woman is a leader in her own life. Like, for example, when I'm so deep in her story, it's crazy. I could tell you anything about her. So when the first house fell through, her now ex-husband at the time, he had all these stories about like, well, I had to change realtors at the last minute because, blah, blah, blah. And this was kind of the first red flag, but there was kind of a good story behind it. So it didn't seem like a red flag. But everything had gone through him when that first house fell through. So Reesa was having a difficult time getting answers because it had all gone to his email. The phone calls went to his phone. So when they went to look for a second house, she changed up everything. And she told her husband at the time, she said, everything will go through me. I want to be the primary contact for the real estate agent. I want the emails to go to me. I want the phone calls to go to me. And so it just makes her such a pleasure to listen to because she was taking accountability and she was being a leader in her own life, even while this guy was playing a con. He was just a great con artist, but it's just, it makes you want to follow anyone's story when they are a leader in their own life, when they are taking an active role and doing the hard thing. I mean, to be honest, I have a pretty good marriage, but if something fell apart in like some deal that was sort of my husband's wheelhouse and he felt kind of embarrassed that it fell apart or whatever, I don't know that I would have the courage to be like, okay, well, next time we're doing this, everything goes to me. All the phone calls go to me. I mean, that's a tough conversation to have in your relationship. But look at what a bold leader she was in her own life, that she was like, we are not repeating this. And it looks like this con went on for, I think, a year or two. But honestly, if she weren't such an active, accountable leader in her own life, this con artist was so good. I think it could have gone on for a decade if she did not consistently do the hard thing and have the hard conversations and make the bold moves. And you know what's interesting about this, and this is what applies to all of us. As a lot of you guys know, writing is my love. It's my main background. So I've read a ton of books about how to write great stories. I've written multiple memoirs, and that it's like fiction in the sense that you have to share what actually happened, but you are trying to craft a story. So I really immersed myself in the art of storycraft. And one of the things you see about all great characters in any story, movie, book, whatever, is that they were active forces in their own life. You've never really seen a great movie about someone who, through the whole movie, through the whole story, they just whined and complained and pointed the finger at everyone else. And then the story just ends with them whining and things kind of coincidentally fall into a conclusion, and then the story ends. You've never read a story like that because it's not a good story. In fact, there is like one of the things that is a classic bad writer thing to do is if you have a deus ex machina, I think that's how you say it. It's a Greek term, deus ex machina ending, meaning the main character is not the agent of their own resolution. Meaning, so what it comes from is in ancient Greek plays, I guess sometimes the writers were like, listen, we've got to go to like a festival and drink wine, and I don't really have time to figure out how to bring this story to an end. So you'd be watching this play and there's stuff playing out like these two people are in love, but like the king says they can't get married or whatever. And then it would just end with a guy who's playing a god would actually be lowered down by a rope. And, he had robes on to like look like God. And he'd go and, he'd have some sort of fake lightning bolt and he'd just kill everyone. And that's how it ends. It's kind of incredible, honestly. Like next time I write a book, we'll just have a guy in a rope come down, like everyone dies.
We're killing everyone.
And there you go. And I mean, really, I wish we should, if as a writer, it would make it, much easier to wrap up your novels. But what that means with that kind of ending is that the protagonist, the main character, they don't resolve the situation on their own. And that is a very unsatisfying ending. There's actually a famous book a few years ago. I found it unsatisfying because the main character has been fighting this villain through the whole book. And then at the end of the book, an animal just kind of randomly chases the villain off a cliff. And that's how the villain dies. Those aren't the exact details, but basically that's the idea. And it's like, okay, that is so unsatisfying because this main character has been fighting this villain the whole time. And I kind of wanted the satisfaction of like the main character resolves this. So that's that kind of ending. And that is how you live a great story. You know, Reesa has turned her tragedy, a terrible tragedy, into a great story to the tune of millions upon millions upon millions of views. And we talk a lot on this podcast about how you can live a great story. And we also talk about the importance of leadership and being accountable in your own life. But until I watched Reesa's videos, it never occurred to me that we need to combine these two and to spell this out for you. If you want to live a great story, you cannot live in victim mentality. You can't have this woe is me, nobody helps me, pointing the finger at other people mentality. That is a boring story. Nobody wants to go to the movies with their popcorn and watch that movie about a whiner who says everything is everyone else's fault. It's a terrible movie. If you want to live a great story, you have to be a bold, decisive person who takes accountability for your circumstances and for your life. And I think that's what a lot of us are missing. We say, oh, I want to live a great story. I want to live a great story. All right. Then start taking accountability and stop blaming your spouse or your kids or your neighborhood or your parents or your circumstances. And I'm not saying these people are not messing with you. I mean, I know people who come from seriously toxic circumstances. Well, look at Reesa. She was married to a literal con artist, and she acknowledges the harm that he did to her, but she is also taking accountability for her own life and what she is going to do moving forward, taking a clear-eyed look at the lessons she can learn. This is, man, you talk about main character energy. That's Reesa, like total main character energy. And you know, that's a popular term now. That's big on social media to say you want main character energy. Ooh, she has main character energy. That comes from accountability. No one has ever seen another person pointing fingers, whining about how nobody helps them and they can't get a break and been like, ooh, main character energy. That's something energy, but it's not main character energy. You have to be responsible for your own circumstances in your own life and have that leader mentality in order to have main character energy. And when you have main character energy, you will start living a really great story. You will be a protagonist who is worthy of an epic plot. It all starts with taking responsibility. It all starts with stepping into leader mode in your own life. So that's the big thing I learned from again Reesa and Teesa. And the other thing I want to say about that, and she points this out too, is that I think one of the things that happened here is she didn't see the red flags in part because it was COVID and she was very isolated from her village. People talk about, you know, do you see red flags in people? Do you notice the red flags? Well, people weren't meant to see red flags in isolation. Dating and friendship and forming relationships, it was always supposed to happen in village, in community, and your community would help you see the red flags. If you've ever gotten completely played by someone, and no one watching can relate to that. No, nobody.
Of course not.
But listen, if you've ever gotten completely played by someone and you feel like a fool for not seeing the red flags, you weren't meant to see all the red flags on your own. You were meant to be doing all this in a village where you would have 7 cousins and 8 brothers and sisters and 10 aunts and uncles who were all taking you aside and being like, is that normal that he's doing that? Like, I think maybe that story about why he got home so late that night, does that seem a little crazy to you? Red flags are supposed to be parsed out in the context of a village. And so, you know, whenever you're forming friendships or dating or anything like that, if you don't have a village, which most of us don't feel bad if you miss some red flags, because it was never supposed to be up to you alone. Finding red flags, it has never been the job of just one individual. And I would also add, part of a village is that you have there's a multi-generational context. You have people of all ages around you. So if you're like 24 and in the party scene and you guys are drinking and doing some edibles and that's what all of your friends are doing, you guys are probably all missing the same red flags. Yeah. But in a village context, you would have your grandmother and your aunt and your cousin and people of different backgrounds and income levels and education levels and ages to evaluate the situation and say, that guy's playing games. Like, I'm seeing some red flags that maybe your peers are not seeing. So just think about that when I have a feeling you are going to be binging Reese's content, as I think is what we're all doing tonight. Yep. Just remember that part of the reason this happened to her, and obviously highly intelligent, highly, responsible and accountable woman, is it was COVID. It was isolation. It sounds like, because I know everything about her life, her mom and aunt are from New Jersey. I mean, I know everything about her. She does have kind of a community, but because COVID was happening, they just didn't have that much of a chance to get to know this guy and to see the daily interaction. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on Reesa Teesa. I need to hurry and get to the main topic because I have to go watch the other 57 videos that I have not watched. I will keep you guys posted.